All right, so I'm really doing this. Yeah. Welcome to Confessions of a Lost Soul. I could say I don't know where to begin, but it's just where do I begin? I mean, I've wanted to start this podcast for a while now. I've always wanted to do a podcast, whether it goes somewhere or goes nowhere. So if you're listening right now, thanks. Keep this to yourself because, yeah, I'm not really sure yet how I even feel about this, but you're along for the journey with me. Um, you know, I kind of have always wanted to start this and have just been what I always say is lazy, but then I really acknowledge it's not laziness, it's fear, right? We're human. So we have fear of rejection, we have fear of failure, we have fears of a lot of things, and they keep us from starting anything really. And I finally just got the courage and I said, well, who cares if I fail? This at the end of the day is for me. If it helps someone along the way or someone can relate, great, but this is almost for me and my therapy. And funny as a a psych nurse practitioner saying that, but really it talking helps, right? Talking out loud helps. Venting helps, for better or worse. Sometimes not always for better, but it really does. And social connection helps, and being able to just say how you're feeling. And I think sometimes we struggle to find the words and the meaning behind how we're feeling, and it kind of takes a lot of rambling and maybe a lot of detours, but we eventually get the message we want across. And you notice I'm probably gonna, blabber or word fumble a lot, but hey, like that's what this is. This is real. This is authentic. This is, you know, unedited. And I want this to really just be from the heart. And I want this to mean something for myself and hopefully for others. Honestly, I've been feeling really lost lately, and not like the, I'm lost hiking in a wilderness, dramatic screaming way, to be honest, but more of that just like heavy way of lost where it just sits with you throughout the day. And, you can point to some things here and there, but in reality, it's probably a culmination of a lot of things. And that's really, kind of what got me to the point of getting the name to this podcast, Confessions of a Lost Soul. Because, hey, I'm lost. I find myself at certain points of my life and I lose myself again. And I think that's part of the journey. But, there's a lot of times where I feel lost, a lot of times where I feel lonely. And I'd like to think I'm certainly not the only one who feels that way. So, well, I'd love to say this is for everyone. And I mean, to me, this podcast is for everyone. But at the end of the day, it's a way for me to kind of communicate my feelings of loneliness and feeling lost and how I navigate them, how I will be navigating them, because these are, my confessions along the way. And I'm hoping you can relate. I have a lot of big ideas, and I feel like I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I'll have these really big ideas, but then because of that, I kind of don't do anything about it. It's like, oh, I could do this with this, or I could do this. But then you end up like not doing anything. And you take a lot of cool notes and you write a lot of things on a piece of paper. Like this, Confessions of a Lost Soul. I must have written 20 plus pages on a notebook of episode ideas and font theme and how I could incorporate this in Spotify and utilize video for TikTok or YouTube or all these other things. And the ideas were great, but they sat on a paper for, I'm going to be honest with you, probably 2 months. And that's not helpful. It's not helpful to anyone who may find these videos and podcasts helpful. It's not helpful to me because instead of starting this journey and kind of just seeing where it goes, I'm just kind of sitting and writing about it. And I noticed that, if you're someone like me, I certainly deal with depression during winter. It's a lot tougher, as I'm sure a lot can relate, and then on top of that, kind of just feeling like lost right now and a little lonely and kind of lacking in certain aspects of life that sure we can unpack in many more episodes. But But yeah, I noticed that in those moments, writing these big ideas, it kind of helps for a little. It distracts me, which is great. It gets my mind off things. Like I said, word fumbling. But yeah, never puts into action. You kind of just are stuck. And while for a moment at least you might not feel worse and you might feel a little better, but then you'll go right back the second you stop. I know me, like I leave that coffee shop, all these big ideas, I get home and I sit down and it's like, whew, just a boulder kind of really like hits you again. And you all of a sudden have all these feelings again that you thought you got rid of, but you really didn't. And so, really, like to kind of again take all these detours and crazy ways to get back to the point of this is kind of what led me to actually finally doing this podcast. And I mean, one person may listen to this, maybe 10, maybe 0. But for me, I'm putting myself out there, and that's therapeutic in and of itself. And if it does reach anyone, that's awesome. You know, hey, it'd be really cool eventually to be able to have guests on this podcast and talk with other people, right? Because we're all lost at certain points in our life. We all feel lonely at certain points in our life. And, you may be in that spot now, or you may have been in it in the past. And either way, then I think it is really beneficial to hear these stories and from real people, like your bartender, your cashier, your college dropout, your teacher, your police officer, your roommate, your friend, whoever it may be. We all have most likely felt this at some point in our life. Even people who, we might admire and think have accomplished big things like Hollywood actors or musicians. I'd be hard pressed to think that at some point in their life they didn't also feel lost or lonely. And, I think when we talk about this more, we almost heal ourselves without even realizing it. And that's where sometimes I will say, to be blunt, it's venting, it's spiraling, and it's healing. Because being able to talk about things and talk out, either like me here talking to myself in an empty room, or, you at home, or maybe I'm talking to a future guest in a future episode, and then I can look back on this episode and say, wow, look at how far it's come. Either way, I think at the end of the day, it really is the importance of human connection. And I know me, I'm the first to always say, you could give me, $100,000 sports car, or we could go, get this nice, I don't know, Gucci outfit, whatever it may be. And that could give you a little temporary excitement, right? I mean, hey, material things, but we all get excited, but it doesn't do it. But then, put me at a happy hour for 2 hours with some friends or even people I've never met, and just having random silly conversation, and it's worth $1 million to me. And it's got me to realize that, we as humans, we're social creatures, and we need that community. We need that connection. And that's what I hope this is. I hope it's a place where selfishly I can connect with other people, other creators, other, just anyone who wants to talk about these things, about these feelings of, depression, mental health, feeling lost, feeling lonely. And, how do we navigate it? Maybe we navigate it together in an episode, and we vent and we spiral a little and we heal from it. But I'm hoping to be able to do that and to be that person. And I think, if I can connect with other people, irrelevant of how far or not far this podcast goes, it's a win in my book. And so, yeah. And so really, I'm going to be honest, I have just some points I want to hit. So I'm going to probably look off screen a little, but yeah, I'm human. This is not scripted at all, if that's not obvious, but just some things, because if not, then I could just keep rambling about absolute nonsense. But, looking at the big picture and the feeling of being lost or being lonely, I think a lot of us reach that point where we ask ourselves a lot of questions like, what is life supposed to look like? Is this what our life is supposed to look like? Is this all that's left? And is it just kind of on a downward from here? Or, could it go back up? I think I've even gotten scared sometimes where I'll look and I'll say, okay, well, am I going to just work, go to the gym, come home, go to bed, have dinner with my husband and, hopefully hang out with friends. But, or is there more? Can we get outside of our comfort zone at any age and try new things and not be afraid to put ourselves out there? And it can be scary. It could be totally scary. I mean, I'll be honest. Recording this is the easy part because I'm alone in this room. Uploading it, it's pretty scary. People people you don't know. It's like, how are they going to take it? But again, I think the first step is just trying, right? We're all human. And, if you're feeling alone or lost or lonely like I am, find ways to connect, find ways to put yourself out there. I think it's so important. I noticed when I stayed quiet and kind of kept everything in my head, the spiral just got worse. I would literally find myself walking around the kitchen, kind of like talking myself out of the dark headspace. And again, it worked momentarily, but, it was a Band-Aid and a temporary Band-Aid at best. And when I mean temporary, we are talking 5-10 minutes max. So didn't really do much. But in the moment, it was, helpful. And then I'd get back into my rut. Or there's examples, I could go off a bunch, but, or you're scrolling, right, on social media. And we all know social media is not the best, right? But you'll keep scrolling. And I would notice that for me, the time would go past. So in my head, at least it was, wow, this day is flying by. So it was a distraction. Did it make me feel good? And was it a good distraction? Absolutely not. I usually felt awful afterwards because then, we went down the comparison rabbit hole, which we have plenty more times and episodes to get into that because that I think is important on another level. But, it was more about it didn't help. It didn't help at all. And so I knew I shouldn't be doing it, right? But 2 hours later, I'm in that rut again. I'm sitting on the couch, nothing to do, and boom, back scrolling on the phone. And I feel like there's a fancy word for it, but I'm literally going to just call it like the depression spiral or death loop, because you're always going to end up back where you started, which is like, again, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling lonely, it's not going to help at all. And so I realized I got to do something about it. And I looked at like kind of each aspect of my life, and I'm doing this in real time too. So let me tell you, we'll hear a lot more updates, but I, kind of big picture looked at it and said, well, what am I doing that I like? What am I doing that I don't like? Or what do I feel I'm missing? And for me, having been a consultant and working in finance before going into nursing, that's also a whole nother story. But just to kind of paint the picture of, from my job and career aspect, I love what I do. I mean, I get to talk with people, and I love talking, if that isn't obvious. And I love providing therapy, and I love helping people with their mental health. And it's all awesome. And I love it when it's work, but again, it is work. And I'm in a professional setting, and I notice that outside of work, I'm lacking that human connection. I don't really have a huge friend group right now, especially, living back at home in the suburbs, which is another struggle in and of itself that hopefully will be alleviated someday. But, for the here and now and the present, what can I do? And one of them was, Chris, you've always wanted to start a podcast and just share your thoughts, share the way you navigate things and deal with life and, dealing with being lost and feeling lonely and just, the importance of human connection. Do it. Do it. Look at this depression and this low that you're feeling and have something good come about it. Even if you are rambling to a microphone and a camera for, 30 minutes, who cares? Just do it. You might feel good afterwards, and it'll touch your creative side, which is something I certainly enjoy. And I also thought about it because you know, selfishly, if this does go somewhere, I would love to then, have guests on the show that I could talk with and interview, because I notice like that is the big thing I love about my job. I essentially am like building bonds and interviewing my patients and really getting to understand them so I can help them. But the one piece that was lacking, especially because I didn't have it outside of work, was I have like, some patients you'll have that you connect so well with, and it feels like you were just talking to a friend, and it's a 30-minute session and it's over before it starts. And you're like, oh, I want to talk to them so much more. And there's certain things I'd love to say, but right, it's a professional setting. There's things you do and don't say. And so I thought, well, what if I created a space where we could still talk, whether I'm talking out loud like this episode to myself, or I'm having someone on the podcast and we're talking together, and it can be a sort of like, unfiltered, untherapeutic, but still therapy kind of talk session. And we work through problems together, or we just discuss life. We talk about, times where we did feel lost, what we did, what we're struggling with in the past, what we're struggling with now, but on a human level and an unprofessional level, to be blunt. And, it can help them because we can vent and spiral and heal and laugh about it. And it can help me because I love connecting with people and being able to connect with them on a deeper level that maybe can form friendships and further creativity. And so that's really where I'm at with this. I want to just build a space and build a community, because I think that's a hugely important thing, which reminds me, let's talk about the word community, right? It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of friendship that just goes beyond the, hey, let's go out and get drinks. But it really makes you feel planted in your environment, and it makes you feel like you belong, makes you feel like, there's something more out there in life, vastly different things. But especially for someone who, introverted or extroverted, but certainly, someone like me who is more extroverted, community is so important. And that's really what I want to build. And so I thought this was the perfect platform to do it. And I will share all my trials and errors along the way. But, I realized that if I didn't do this, then I would just sit in the what if phase, and that would just never help. And so I said to myself, you know what? I've been feeling lost, and I got to say that out loud. And if you've been feeling lost, or you feel lonely, or that you're lacking community, you're not alone, because I'm right there with you. So welcome to the journey. Let's do this together, seriously. And let's figure out. And you know what? Hopefully, even just like, playing this, doing your morning routine makes you feel a little less lonely. I know sometimes when I'll listen to like a good podcast, and good is so subjective, right? Whether it teaches me something, or it just makes me laugh, or it just makes me feel less alone. It's kind of just like a friend in your earbuds or on your speakers, and it helps. It helps you get through the morning, it helps you get through the day, and that's okay. But it's important to not stay in that bubble, right? It's still on your phone, on your stereo, on your speakers, in your headphones, and it's important to instead have real human connection and really to build a community. So, let's do it together. And I think the big thing is, we're not diagnosing ourselves with anything. We're not explaining it away. We're talking it through, and we're naming it, right? And I think naming it is so important. We can feel lost. We can feel heavy. We can feel disconnected, unsettled. We can feel like we're missing something. But let's do something about it, right? And this isn't about notoriety. It's not about getting discovered. It's really about connection. I really am just craving community, which I'm sure there are a lot of people like that. I highly value human connection, and I want depth, not attention, but, I love, and I notice I'm very energized when you have those conversations, those really, really invigorating conversations with a friend or a family member about, like, what is life and what is passion, and how do we, in our own way, no matter how big or small, leave this world a little better than we found it? Or, how do we feel truly connected and not just like we're going through the motion of life, right? Sure, we've all been there. It's like I used to say, which don't mind me, Olipop gets me through the day. And no, I am not sponsored, but that'd be cool. But I feel like I'm almost like Casper the Ghost, and I'm kind of just floating through the day, and I knew that's not good, that's not healthy. There's got to be a better way to do this, and this is not normal, right? Not everyone, we all go through our ups and downs and our feelings, but not everyone, when it's 30 degrees and cold, we all feel a little down or a little less energized, but I don't think everyone feels like, wow, is there a point to life? And I do. And I'm, on the little bit of the mend now, especially here doing this, but I am not going to lie to you, especially, when the weather first got cold and winter first came, like I felt a little down and depressed for sure. And then I was like, okay, it'll get better. And then as the days go on, like it's just, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this thing called life? The check engine light came on the car today, and I waited 2 hours for the tow truck to come in 20-degree weather. And I'm like, oh, why am I doing life? And thinking up the car, has a warranty, it's good. And again, first world problems, but $500 later, because the warranty ended 29 days ago, and I go, why am I doing life? What is the point of all this? But while I am brave enough to admit I don't know the answer to that, or I at least won't comfortably answer it now, I also know that there is a point. And I think that's what this is about too, is finding that point. And at least for me, when I did a lot of, internal thinking and self-actualization, big fancy words for just, thought about it and wrote on a piece of paper, really scientific stuff here. But I started to realize, like, all right, well, the point to life, right, is we have to look at what we enjoy, what's our passions, what makes us happy, what gives us that like caffeine adrenaline rush. And I was like, for me, social connection, having conversation. And I mean, it could be silly, trivial, like surface level conversation, but like that doesn't do it for me. I like the deep conversation. Like, let's get into it. Maybe it's looked at as nosy, but I know, like, I'll be talking with a friend and it's like they'll talk about their struggles and what they're dealing with, and we'll just really get into it. Why do you feel this way, or why do you not? Or, why is the anxiety and depression worse? Or are you living at mom's house and you want to pull your hair out, and what are you going to do? Or are you unhappy in your environment? Or are you unhappy, with your relationship, whatever it may be? But like, let's talk about it. Like, let's talk about like, what is life, right? Like, what is life? Let's really get down to the granular level. Like, it's about human connection, and about creating community, and about giving back, and all these things. And also, trying to navigate it and trying to figure it out. And you know what? Even sitting here now, like, I think it really is important. Like, talking things out actually does help. Silence makes the spiral worse. You sit in silence, you kind of like brain rot, because you just go down a death loop, and you think it's going to get better, but it doesn't. So you just kind of sit, and you don't do anything about it, which does not help either. And as quickly as you think, oh, is this going to get better? It gets worse. And you know what? You need to call someone, you need to vent about it, and then you get it off your chest, and you feel even a little bit better. And that counts for something. And so I think that really is important. And, thinking back and like kind of even looking back on this as kind of like, my first episode, I feel like I rambled a lot and I kind of like went all over the place. But, I feel like I had just like a lot of things I wanted to say and not enough time. But then I realized that, this is the first episode and I want people to kind of just hear about it and see, is this interests you? Does it not? And, I want to just more kind of explain what this show will be. And, this podcast, it's an invitation. It's not a performance. Everyone's welcome here. Everyone should feel they belong. This is a community that I want to build. And this is my confessional. But it doesn't only have to be my confessional. And my hope is, as I continue to show up and share and be vulnerable and be consistent, that maybe it will inspire others as well. And we can really build this into a community. And, we can talk and we can connect. And I can get to know you and you'll certainly get to know me more. But, yeah, I really think that's important because, I'm not afraid to say, I'm Christopher James, your host of this podcast, Confessions of a Lost Soul. And you know what? I'm lost and I want connection. And talking helps. And unfiltered, blunt, in your face, throw some humor in type of talking really helps. And almost gets you kind of to the conclusion you're hoping to get to. And it helps you with decision making, which is always great. So, I think it helps. I could be in La La Land and other people could tell me, Chris, you're nuts. And when I talk, things get worse, not better. And I will respect that because you know what? We're all different and we all think, feel, and act differently. And be a pretty boring world if we all, felt, think, and act the same. I like that we're different. Differences are awesome. If we weren't different, there'd be, nothing to talk about. And I, for one, know my love of connection and community and deep conversation would probably not exist because we're just all the same. So it's like a movie like Wall-E when they're all riding on the chairs, all the same. But, I digress as again, I'll always be ranting. But yeah, really, if I could summarize anything from this first episode and what my hope is for this podcast is I hope it builds a community. I hope it builds social connection. I hope if you're at home and you feel lost or alone and, craving connection, craving friendships, I can't talk. Craving community, that this finds you and this helps even for a little bit. And as we navigate this together, we can build tools together that help us then, solve it. And while I say solve it, I don't want to say it as in it'll never come back because I think life is like chapters, right? And as we know, people come and go depending on the chapter. I think also feeling lost or lonely can come and go, just like what you're passionate about in your 20s, you might not be passionate about in your 30s. And at 50, you might be starting a new career, going back to college again. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think there is any timeline for life. I don't think there's any blueprint for life because life's messy, right? Life's uncomfortable. Life can be happy. It can be sad. It can be awesome. It can be depressing. It can be sociable and energetic, and it can also be really lonely and leave you feeling just blah. But that's okay because it's life and we're going to navigate it together. So, I really just invite you as well to be a part of this. And hey, if you hear this and you want to be on the podcast, please reach out. This is an open invitation because I would love to hear your story and your struggles and your triumphs. And I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to build a community with you. And yeah, just hear about your life, because I find that when we talk to other people and we hear their lives, or we listen to a podcast where two people are, someone's interviewing someone, or we watch a YouTube video where a host is interviewing someone, it just helps a lot. And I feel like because it can be really relatable, even in the silliest way of, oh my gosh, my dog peed in the house today. All right, vent, spiral, hopefully then heal. But how'd you navigate it? And it makes you feel less alone. It makes you feel a little more connected. And that's what my hope is for this. So I'm sure it won't happen, quickly or maybe at all, and that's okay. But if it does happen, I'd love to then, be able to host this Confessions of a Lost Soul. And I'm your host, Christopher James. And I would love to have you on the podcast and get to know you. It's as simple as that, and it is as deep or not deep as that. And yeah, I think I've hopefully rambled enough for this first episode, but I'll see you guys again next Tuesday morning.